On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, we re-rank the title contenders, and can the Knicks get even better despite not making a trade deadline acquisition? We're going to tell you in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? I am Gavin, your Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast. Excited to talk about Knicks Celtics over there this weekend. And of course, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrick.land, and you're going to find out they have a lot of talent, including Liao, who we're going to talk to on today's show. But before we get into that, I wanted to remind you that this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week, allowing you to be an everydayer and join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and, of course, on your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team. But if that's not enough for you, we now have a newsletter introducing Locked On Knicks daily newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with writing from Alex and I, our fantastic team of national writers, and of course, Josh Lloyd giving you the latest and greatest in fantasy basketball. And today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Gametime. If you download the Gametime app, create an account, you can use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase to get some tickets to see a cool concert or maybe even the Super Bowl. I don't know. But on today's show, we're joined by Bailey, and we're going to tell you where the Knicks rank in terms of title contenders post-trade deadline. Are they still ahead of the Cavs even after their big acquisition? How the wings, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, can continue to propel the Knicks offense, and why Josh Hart on the ball might be a solution to some that ails them. And of course, defensively, how the Knicks can continue to protect Jalen Brunson, how they can continue to improve on that end of the floor. We get into it all now with Bailey. All right, guys, as promised, someone I've been looking to bring on the podcast for a while because I really enjoyed his work this entire year. Bailey Liao of both the Strickland, and he has a fantastic YouTube channel called PlayByPlay at PlayByPlay Film Breakdown, where he does just these like incredibly informative videos on the Knicks, and you make NBA basketball, which can be pretty intricate and complicated, really simple and easy to understand, and it's helped me pick up on some things over the course of the year. So Bailey, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you. Appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. It's super kind. I'm just trying my best to put out some good content, but yeah, I'm really excited to be here as well. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. It's great stuff. I figured we could start kind of broad since just incidentally timing. We weren't necessarily planning on doing this post deadline, but we are post deadline. The Celtics and Thunder don't really make any moves outside of the Celtics moving off Jaden Springer. The Cavs bring in DeAndre Hunter. Obviously, the Lakers are much better. I would say, and I think most sane people would say, Dallas is quite a bit worse. Bailey, I'll open this up to you first, and Alex, I'm curious your take on this. Just like when we zoom out and the Knicks not really doing anything, where you'd have them in the title contention, where I've been all year, is I think the Celtics I've had in their own tier. I think at this point I would probably put Oklahoma City in that tier with how good they've been this year. I would have maybe the Cavs a step below that, especially after getting DeAndre Hunter. That actually, like, my main concern with them was the lack of definitive fifth guy. And then I think you'd have the Knicks after that, and you could throw the Lakers in there. You could still throw the Mavs in there if you want. But to me, the trade deadline didn't really change much other than I like Cleveland a little bit more. But I'm curious your take on it, Bailey.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think you're spot on with the top of it. I think Celtics are there. OKC to me is there as well. If you think about their team, they're a championship team, and they didn't necessarily do that much, but they're literally about to add Chuck back, right? So like, you have a really, really good team. You're about to add a top 3 defender in the league, someone who's a stretch 5, can shoot the ball as well. That's going to be a dangerous team. Cavs, to me, I know this is just bias, but like, it's hard to be scared of them after actually just like demolishing them in the playoffs.
Dude, that's how I felt. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I felt that way all season long, and I'm like, I gotta take into account they've all gotten better. Mobley's a little bit different, but I haven't been scared of them, though. I do think the big thing the Knicks took advantage of last time was them not having that clear-cut fifth guy. And Hunter, maybe your mileage will vary, but I think he changes that just a little bit.
Definitely. So I think the Hunter piece is really interesting. I think they did get better, but I don't necessarily know how much better I think they got. And I think a lot of it is because they're really potent off of Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And then you're upgrading the shooter from Strus to Hunter, which Hunter's been phenomenal this year, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily their main source of offense. And then you kind of get rid of Karis LeVert coming off the bench, who's a lot of times is their primary creator off the bench. So you're kind of losing a little bit there. I definitely do not think they got worse. I think they got better. But I don't know if it's orders of magnitudes where I'm necessarily putting them ahead or like in the same tier as like Celtics or OKC. Specifically with the Knicks, I actually think we match up really well with them. That first game we played with them, I don't have the exact numbers, but I do actually think Mobley did not shoot a shot in the first quarter. When OG was on him, I don't think he actually attempted a shot. Then he started cooking when in the second we put Cat on him. He saw the Cat matchup and he's like, yeah, I love this. I want to do this. But I think we have the pieces to match up well with them. I still am definitely biased that they don't scare me that much. Mitch returning, I think, helps a lot with that. But yeah, I do think they're excellent. Like, to all of their players' credit, they've all been a lot better this year. They flow a lot better as a team. But
yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm a little more afraid of the Hunter acquisition. I mean, a guy that's like averaging almost 20 a game this year, to add to that team that already has two guards in Mitchell and Garland that are so potent themselves. And then, you have Mobley and Allen to kind of cover up the inside and who also have their own, offensive talents. But Hunter just being the defender that he is, like, I don't know. I feel like he was kind of the perfect player for them. Like, I'm a little annoyed that they managed to add him, at least this current version of himself, where he seems to really be sort of, I think, sort of taking a leap this year. I mean, he's kind of just scaled up everything that he was doing previously. And, just started taking more shots, taking, more threes and just shooting them at the same rate or slightly better than he's been doing for the last couple of years. I think going to a team now where you might argue he will have, well, I don't even think it's arguable that he'll have less offensive responsibility and more freedom to just take open shots, I think is pretty huge. I don't know. I don't want to say I'm surprised that like Atlanta traded him, but there's a small part of me that's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Atlanta's been bad this year. I'm kind of surprised that they went in looking more like a seller at this deadline.
I think it was Jalen Johnson being out for the year is probably the changer. But
I guess, but I mean, you figure you maybe still just keep that core intact and then say, okay, we'll go get him next year. I mean, most of the guys are pretty young. Like Trae Young
don't have to pick, which like makes it really weird.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little baffling there. But other than that, there wasn't any real movement at the top that really, other than the Lakers, obviously, who were just seismic. But if you want to say that they're at the top, fine. I think we're going to have to see how that plays out on the court first. It's midseason acquisitions, even if they're Luka Doncic, don't generally like work out that well in the first half season that they get because nothing's established yet. Nobody knows how to play with each other yet. And as we've seen with like the Knicks, for example, like that really matters. These guys need to kind of know where each other are going to be on the court at any given time. So other than that, I'm kind of with you guys. I didn't see anything too seismic that, really inspired me that much. Obviously, Bailey, I think you were astute pointing out like the Thunder are getting Chet back, which is like their version of a big acquisition. And, the Knicks likewise getting Mitch back. I think they're going to do pretty well for themselves that way because I think they've been needing that sort of presence lately. But I didn't really leave this thing other than the Cavs one. We'll see how it works out. Maybe a little scary and maybe makes me a little more worried about having to face them in the playoffs or something. If Hunter fits in nice and seamlessly into that starting lineup, but otherwise, I feel more or less the same today than I did yesterday about the Knicks' chances in the East this year, which is cautiously optimistic. We'll see how things go, I guess. All right, we'll be right back with Bailey in just a moment. We talked through the trade deadline, pretty quiet one for most of the contenders, but now it's up to the Knicks to figure out how to get even better on the back half of the season. We're going to talk about some of the low-hanging fruit that they could grab to try to get even better on offense. Even though they already boast a number 2 offense in the entire league, how can they get even better? We'll tell you about it in just a moment. But first, we wanted to let you know about our friends over at Robinhood. And with Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
Yeah, I'm in a similar place. We talked it through yesterday, Alex, so we don't have to dive in on it. I do like Kuzma for the Bucks. I think that was a good fit, and Bailey we'll get into it a little bit. But he put out this great video a few weeks ago, just basically breaking down that Bucks games and all the ways the Knicks were able to weaponize Brook Lopez being on the floor and him always being in a drop, and him on OG and Tom Thibodeau just hunting that relentlessly. And I do think it's significant that Milwaukee, like specifically in a Knicks series, could say, all right, we're going to lean a little bit more into Giannis at center, Kuzma at the 4, and play smaller. That is just such a departure from how they played over the years. And Lopez is like such a strength. Obviously, is like his rim protection defensively. You lose that, and his spacing on offense. So I just think Milwaukee's such a good matchup for the Knicks. And also, at least if things hold right now, you wouldn't even see them until you hypothetically got past the Celtics. So it's hard to get too concerned. Philly, obviously at full strength, is interesting, and they're talented, and there's, who knows, maybe there's a world where they upset Cleveland in round 1 and everyone loses their minds. But I do think the bulk of the interesting stuff and the additions at the trade deadline happen in the Western Conference, which, like, we could talk about how good Houston is, how good Memphis is, how good Denver is, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Mavs, the Timberwolves, on and on and on. The Warriors now, none of it matters, because if you're in the finals, you're in the finals, and you only have to worry about one of those teams. But Bailey, why I initially wanted to have you on is because I think like a common theme in all the videos you've been putting out has kind of been like the term I would use, and the term I sent to you is like low-hanging fruit the Knicks can do to still improve their team. And I think it's what's so tantalizing is they have been great. They do have whatever top 6 offensive rating or net rating, a top 5 record in the NBA. And it feels like on top of adding Mitch, like the trade deadline acquisition, quote unquote, could be just leaning into like these very basic things that can make them better. I'm curious, starting on the offensive side of the ball, what are sort of the first like few things you think of when I use that term low hanging fruit in terms of the Knicks still getting even better?
Yeah, I would separate this question into 2 parts. I think like one is when we play most teams that aren't like really, really strong defensively, I think like a lot of times we look very good. Just because obviously the offense is very, very good, right? We have 2 offensive hubs. Brunson's incredible, Cat's incredible, and you're surrounding them with 3 very good players. So it's easy to kind of like I don't want to say like sleepwalk into a win, but a lot of times like you don't have to like do really complex stuff to beat these teams. So I think sometimes like we don't focus on things we need to work on to beat the best teams, which is fine. It's not a big deal. But I think like one thing I really want to see more, which has happened recently to Tip's credit, which I know a lot of people don't want to do that, is just everyone else is kind of stepping up into just being a little bit more aggressive, especially before the OG injury. You saw Mikhail really, really become more aggressive, driving more. OG too was more aggressive and he looked more confident, and he talked about it in that post-game interview, right? Where he wasn't really saying like, I just need a ton more shots. He was just like, with the touches I'm already getting, nothing's really that different. I just want to like expose those opportunities even more. Right, which is a lot of what I think happened earlier on more so than now is everyone kind of wants to defer to everyone else. And that's what happens when you have a new team, right? Everyone's like, oh, is this Brunson's team? Like, should Brunson be taking more shots? Brunson's thinking, oh, should I be passing more? Like, I have new teammates. Like, what does that look like? And I think like we're starting to hit a groove where everyone feels like they're finding their place. But the slight concern I have is that groove feels like it hits against teams that might not be the best defensively. And when trouble starts hitting, we kind of default back to like Brunson ISO and maybe like a pick and roll, but everyone else get out of the way, which also is that's how the NBA works. That's fine. There's like we have a superstar. That's how the NBA works. But I would, if I'm nitpicking, I would like in clutch situations run some of the stuff that works really, really well and see how that goes. Instead of like just having a different default, because that just gives you more variety in how you're attacking, especially when the game slows down in the playoffs.
Yeah, Bailey, if I could direct it right back at you, because I'm kind of curious. I feel like one thing that I've noticed, and you're probably closer than me on watching the tape an appropriate amount of times for Tom Thibodeau's liking, such as maybe 2 to 3, perhaps even 4 times, which is about to his threshold. What I've been noticing lately compared to like earlier in the season when I feel like the offense was maybe humming a little more is, which is crazy to say considering they had 2 140-point games recently, but in a row, no less. But, I just think that there was something more aesthetically pleasing about early in the season. And it seemed like they were really trying to go to like, and maybe this was just them kind of trying to simplify things early in the season, but it worked so well. It seemed like they were going to kind of like Horns looks of like Cat and Josh Hart setting screens both for Brunson at the top of the key. Brunson using one or both of those screens, sometimes rejecting them, but OG and Mikal mostly sitting in the corners. And then those two having like a really good synergy of like, if one would get the ball and they were closed out on properly, then they would put it on the floor, drive to the inside. Perhaps there's an open layup there for them or a dunk, then they would take it if it was there. But if they got, sealed off on the inside, then they would look immediately to that other corner, try to get motion going that way. And then they would kick it to the other guy. He might have an open 3, or then at that point, maybe Josh Hart starts cutting in. Like, it just seemed like there was a lot more movement going on at certain times early in the season. And I agree with you. I think that sort of stuff could be easy to go to for them to just find some low-hanging fruit, like against some of the better teams. Now, granted, maybe some of the better teams in the league would be able to sniff that out really quickly, but maybe at least get some on their toes and thinking about something different. You know what I mean? Rather than just sort of Brunson comes down, you get one singular screen set for him. He tries to cook on whatever the switch is and then maybe kick out to a shooter or whatever. I feel like that's just a little more predictable and relying pretty heavily on just getting Brunson into his groove in disadvantageous scenarios, where the other team is kind of starting to make their mark. And then the go-to is just like, oh, just give it to Brunson and let him cook. And a lot of times we see that works, but other times we see maybe not so good. So if there were some simple things like that you would want to work in, like what are some of the things that you would think would be good to go back to that were kind of there a little more early in the season?
Yeah, so I actually have a theory on that. I think we ran the horn set a bit more when teams are more willing to play drop. So Brunson gets to come off that pick by a Cat and Hart at the horns, and have a lot of space. So then you're driving help. When that help comes, you can kick it out to Mikal or OG on the corner, and they get to attack a lot more there. I forgot exactly which game it was, but I think there was one where when we were running horns, the switch just pushes Brunson back out, and then he's kind of like now at like the Madison Square Garden logo, a little like close to half court, and you're resetting a pick and roll. And I think that's where the offense started looking like it got slower. And I think Tibbs is starting to adjust by doing different formation that doesn't start with a Brunson high pick and roll. The easy thing for me still is just move Brunson off ball. So I think like when Brunson comes off ball, and this just also comes to trusting the other players you have, with Mikal, with Hart, even with OG. And I think that's totally fine, right? But when Brunson moves off ball, a couple things happen. First is just run the play for Brunson still. When Brunson catches it, he now has his dribble. He can shoot, he can drive, he has his dribble, he's in triple threat, and you're giving one of the best ISO scorers that advantage, that small advantage. It's impactful. One of the things that's happening when he is off ball is when he's the one in the horns and he comes out, he catches it really far away. So he catches it like a good 2 feet behind the 3-point line, where I think like one of the easiest things to do is have him catch it at the 3-point line. If you have him catch it at the 3-point line, as a defender, you better close out. If you're not going to close out, you can just shoot it immediately. Or if you close out a little harder, then you're giving him space to drive by. When you're catching it like 2 feet out, it's hard for he's not exactly like a deep 3-point shooter threat. So you're not seeing like that closeout as hard. But even then, just being off ball, even catching it that far out, you're still giving him the advantage to to just be in triple threat, which I still think is advantageous.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated to your point to see how this looks against Boston tomorrow, how this looks in the upcoming games against the Cavs. And until OG's back, we won't really see the full picture. But what I've been begging for all year, and I think you and I maybe even talked about it on Twitter briefly, is just more Mikal Bridges initiation and generally just more propulsion from him towards the rim. And I think you did a great job in your videos. It's something I've been noting on this podcast. He's just been much more aggressive off the catch, like when Cat or when Brunson create an advantage. The term you use, I love, like pressing that advantage and saying like, hey, like this is not whatever Landry Shamet catching and driving closeout. This is like Mikal freaking Bridges catching and driving a closeout. And it's almost like not that he's like ever been a mega star, but like remembering who you were in Brooklyn for those 20 games, even remembering who you were in Brooklyn last year. And where I was so frustrated early season was I'm like, this guy is just so incredibly overqualified for the way the Knicks are using him, and they can scale that up even more and he will still be overqualified. And I think we're now starting to see that with him running a little bit more offense. I've loved in recent games, like again, you highlighted in that Bucks game, like using OG Anunoby as a pick and roll ball handler, using him as a role guy. If you're going to have a center on him, like let Josh Hart run a pick and roll with him. And like the one, you're taking stuff off Brunson's load. Two, you're inevitably involving worse defenders because the other team's two best defenders are going to be guarding, generally in order, Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns, and then Mikal Bridges. So that is a great way to attack. I'm curious, and I know this is kind of what you were hinting at, like what does it look like? How does it work against the best teams in the league? How do you want them to attack the Boston Celtics? Because you can say like, all right, hey, I want OG to initiate, or I want Mikal to initiate. Does that work as well when it's like one of Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum potentially as the defender there? And if not, you're just so reliant on either Jalen or Cat to create an advantage. And also those guys, like I think some of this is they just have to play at a really elite level to beat those teams, because there are times, and this is another thing you've noted in your videos, where Jalen and Cat will drive, they will create an advantage, but they'll have tunnel vision, Cat even more so than Jalen, and they'll like create that advantage, but then they won't swing it. And then there's no point in creating that advantage because the help will just kind of negate it if you don't make that simple pass. And it's also on the next guy's off the ball, but I'm rambling a little bit. How do you think they approach attacking Boston? I guess tomorrow with the caveat that OG's out, but if they meet in the playoffs and they're fully healthy. All right, guys, we're going to be back with Bailey one more time to talk through the Knicks defense, why there are some simple ways they can improve on that on the floor. We're going to tell you what those methods are. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. I love Gametime because when I'm looking for tickets to my next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price, I know it can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it has never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app literally does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I absolutely love it and don't want to use any other ticketing site. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat. I've mentioned this a couple of times with the Childish Gambino concert this past summer, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. I was shocked I got that price. The seat view feature is also a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. It's incredibly reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guaranteed. If you find a better deal somewhere somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. So there's literally no reason not to use Gametime. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Yeah, and this is actually the same thing all three teams do between OKC, Celtics, and Cavs. They all switch a lot. OKC and the Celtics specifically will put their center on Hart. Cavs don't as much. Cavs will just switch everything and live with it. But we really need to figure out this center on Hart lineup. Not that we can't figure it out because we have before. I think we get a little tunnel vision in the play that we want to execute. And what I mean is this. So sometimes we come down the court and it's very clear that we just want to get Cat the ball, because when you put a center on Hart, that means that there's another player that's going to be on Cat. Typically for Boston, that's Drew Holiday. He might be injured on Saturday, and then for OKC, it's usually J-Dub, right? So sometimes the Knicks just walk the ball up and want to get Cat a touch in the post. And that's a little bit tough when you have two great defenses that know how to swarm the post and prevent help, right? So one of the things that I really want to see happen is run plays to actually get that post matchup a little deeper. That's not just walking the ball up. Everyone sets up in like a stationary position and then throw the ball to Cat, and then everyone get out of the way, right? You can set like a cross screen on the paint so that Cat's coming off with a little bit of advantage and catching it a little bit deeper. You can run off-ball actions when Cat has the ball, which is also going to occupy defenders as well so that people can't double, right? And these are not things that I think these are things that Knicks will figure out and can figure out. It's also a little hard because you're not facing the best defense every single night.
Yeah.
And that's going back to my earlier point is I feel like it's a lot to ask to be like, do these things when you're up 20 beating down on like another defense, right? You're not going to like naturally just practice these things, which is why it's important. Like these games are going to be important, right? We're going to face the Celtics twice, I think, coming up. The Cavs once. Like these are where you're getting those playoff reps against good defenses. So I'm really excited to see how we look. I just think that like we do run a ton of stuff. We have made adjustments throughout the course of this year, and we also have beaten good teams. Right? It's not like the only good teams in the entire NBA are the Cavs, the Celtics, and OKC. Like, that's not true at all. Right? So like I personally think they're in a tier above, but there's definitely good teams that we've beaten. And I just want to see when we play these top teams, what that kind of looks like. And I think like we can look good, and I'm hoping that we will look good.
Yeah, going to be plenty of opportunities to test that theory out against the Celtics twice in the coming weeks and the Cavs twice. So going to get plenty of shots at those really good teams. Although ironically, we're spending a lot of time on offense. The Knicks, of course, second in the NBA in points per 100 possessions this year at 121. So, and that's all while shooting 35.4% as a team 37.5% as a team from three. So not exactly like shooting the lights out from three, shooting pretty good, but not quite on the level of like the Cavs, who are only a point higher than them in that points per 100 possession while shooting 2 points better from three. So the Knicks, have some room to improve while also being the second highest scoring offense in the NBA. I think an area that maybe needs a little more work is the defensive end, where the Knicks are not sitting quite as pretty there. I haven't checked what their rank is in a minute. Sitting right around the middle of the pack, 114.3 points per 100 possessions. I don't feel like counting up and down on the Basketball Reference page, but it looks to be about 15 or 16. So I think I'm about right there. But at any rate, Bailey, I think that's the end of the floor where the Knicks still have a little fine tuning to do. I think we can point pretty easily, we've already mentioned it with regard to the trade deadline, pretty easily to the Mitchell Robinson acquisition, if you want to call it that, as a way for them to potentially get better in that department in a hurry. If he comes back, and as he has a number of times in the past, kind of comes back looking like himself pretty much right away, if they spend time on his conditioning and perhaps bring him back after the All-Star break and have him just storm right out the gates, like maybe this guy changes how the Knicks are able to play basketball. What would be your ideal way? And this doesn't have to include Mitch necessarily. I think that's just the easiest guy to look at and say, hey, this could fundamentally change how the Knicks approach defense. But what are some things that you're looking at to potentially work on in the back half of this season? I call it the back half, but last 30 whatever games of the season, to potentially try to get a little better on defense and improve that standing? Because I'm kind of the belief if they can get like top 12, maybe push towards a top 10 defense by the end of the year, they're sitting pretty, I think, going into the playoffs with how potent the offense is.
Before I get into that, I'll actually just ask you guys first, because I honestly think the first line for me is consistency. I don't think it has anything to do with how they play. Some nights they just look like they're super, super engaged, and everyone's rotating perfectly. Everyone's kind of like on the same page. I obviously can't see them communicating, but in my head, I'm like, oh, like they're clearly just communicating so well with each other, and they all look in lockstep. And then other night, like it could be one night to the next night. The next night they'll miss assignments all the time throughout the entire game. So I'm curious, like when you guys are watching it, is that something you're like seeing as well? Like you're just like some nights they look flat. Because to me, that's the easiest way to get to like top 12, as you said, Alex, without any other changes. Just that like consistency to be a little bit more locked in, which is just weird to say, but like that's genuinely how I feel watching them.
Yeah, I do think the reason I still focus on the offense when it's been so good in the regular season and sometimes underplay the defense is we've had 2 years now with Tom Thibodeau where the defense, it just seems to be dramatically better in the playoffs than it is in the regular season. The offense seems to be dramatically worse than it is in the regular season. And I do think with the talent they have now, they're inoculated against that a little bit, but offensively and defensively, even though like the reputation of Tom Thibodeau is right, like value every regular season game, treat every regular season game like a playoff game. I don't know. And some of it might just be that they played poor offensive teams in the playoffs. So they've had good luck in terms of shooting. It's like, it's too small of a sample size to draw any big picture conclusions of it. But I almost wonder sometimes like how much he is scheming defensively on a game to game basis, because to your point, Bailey, and I know, you know this because you've shown it in a bunch of your videos, there is just like an incredible inconsistency in terms of them just knowing how they're handling certain coverages, and one guy thinking it's a switch and the other guy thinking you're just going to fight through the screen. And that's where you see the bulk of their mistakes. And I just watched your video on the Pistons game, and that was sort of like the height of that frustration where like over and over and over again, they made the wrong decision. But we could even like Memphis, they were on their P's and Q's. And then against the Lakers, I'm like, what the like word I can't say is Karl-Anthony Towns doing? Because he was just like, it was mystifying, and why they had him on Dorian Finney-Smith when you knew the Lakers could just run pick and pop after pick and pop. And it almost seems like Tom Thibodeau, despite the reputation that like we treat every game like game 7, is, I don't, sandbagging might be overstating it, but like, I don't know how much they're emphasizing game planning for specific teams, because sometimes there are just these mystifying mistakes for really smart teams. The other thing, Alex, let me know if you think this is part of it, is they're still a really new team, right? And I do buy into the idea that it almost takes more time to develop defensive chemistry than it does offensive chemistry. And this all might look better by the end of the year. And I think it has been trending a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for them maybe to have an alternative look they could go to from time to time. I mean, I will say they have been sort of doing that lately, which I think is part of why they're starting to look better on defense. They're not sticking, or they're not doubling as often. They're sticking with their man more often, which I think has been great. I think that we see other teams around the NBA, and maybe ones that have been together a little longer, which allows you to kind of do this on the fly. But like, Tibbs has never been open to the idea, it seems like, of switching to a zone briefly or something like that. And I've always thought that that's sort of a good way to get teams out of the mud. Like you said, Bailey, like, just having another look to go to, just something that's different that can be exciting and get you a stop that then gets you back and engaged. Because I agree. I do feel like it just seems like some nights they just don't have as Clyde might say, the fire and desire. You know what I mean? It just looks like they're a little listless out there, and they miss a couple of rotations. It seems like it kind of demoralizes them a bit, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't know. It just seems it seems more between their ears than anything some nights. And we see that with OG, we see it with Mikal sometimes, and those are the two guys that you need to rely on the most. I'd say we probably see at least with like Josh Hart, for example. But with Cat, it manifests more in like the mental lapses of going for stupid fouls if he gets a little frustrated or whatever, which is not something we're seeing as much this year as what was advertised coming from Minnesota, but still not ideal. But yeah, I am kind of with you, like in the sense of sometimes it does seem between their ears. Other times it has seemed schematic, although I think they're getting better at identifying like when they should just stick with their man versus when they should throw these doubles and stuff. And I think that's sort of their key to being better against good teams, is trusting their defenders more, because good teams know how to beat a double. And good teams have players that are talented enough to beat a double. And I think that was sort of the real thing that was killing them against some of those better teams for a little bit, like the Thunder and whatever, is they would go to double, and then it's like, well, yeah, but SGA can obviously crack a double like an egg. You know what I mean? It's not hard for him. Like it's something he does many times a game. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Bailey, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on all this too, because it does seem like they're getting better. And then maybe some of this is just solved by fine tuning and just consistent effort.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the not over doubling, not over helping has been a noticeable change, and one that I think makes a big difference. And I think it actually makes a bigger difference in the playoffs when you get more time to scout, and then you have real assignments like leave Isaac Okoro, or like leave someone to just shoot, and that's the only place you send help from. And as like you get into the habit of not just reacting and not just over helping and not over doubling, and you get a little smarter of where you're going to send the help when you send the help, I think that's going to look really good as well. And no team does this better than like OKC, where I actually think their philosophy is on the first, do not help until first dribble. And then on first dribble in the post, then you send a double. And I think that's how they go about it. But it's like little rules like that I think will start happening once the base defense of, okay, stop jumping whenever you see someone like posting up. Like stop like just sending a double immediately. And we're getting a lot better at that, which is something I'm excited to see further continue. The second thing, Alex, you mentioned that I think is going to be really cool is we do seem to get into those stretches where you can't get a stop. And then it seems a little bit in between the ears where it's like, oh, we just like, we'll never get a stop now. That's where flexibility comes in. And that's where Mitch, I think, is very, very valuable in my mind. I know it's hard to see like what the lineup, what the rotations are going to be, but like in a perfect world where you can just like not worry about any minutes, and let's say like you can just insert Mitch whenever you want, those are the exact times where it's super important, right? Like when it's seemingly hard to get a stop, just throw a lineup out where offense isn't necessarily like the biggest point of concern. Just get that stop, get one stop, get two stops. And I think that kind of changes the dynamics of the game as well. Which is something I'm looking forward to with Mitch's return.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No. That was it.
Finish up. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say on that, like, I think I'm, as someone who did not watch a ton of the Timberwolves in the regular season last year, I'm understanding how their defense was so good with Cat, because we've seen him hold up really well when he's stuck on the perimeter against a smaller guy and slide his feet. And that just has me so encouraged about what it's going to look like with Mitch, because you just feel like teams are literally never going to get an offensive rebound, which puts just an incredible amount of pressure to obviously hit your first shot. And if Cat, like, obviously there will be some fours, like if you play the Celtics, like you're not leaving him with Jason Tatum ideally for a long stretch of any game or ever in a perfect world, but there will be teams, there will be matchups. Cleveland, the most obvious one, where I think you can play those two together and survive. And I think even more so, you can put out bench units that are incredibly stifling without Cat, just with Mitch, where you have Mitch, two wings, like let's just say Mikal, OG, Deuce, and Campaign. And I think that's a group, especially against second units, that can thrive offensively as well. So I do think there are, like, as long as the Knicks are very targeted in how they use them, and I think they will be, like, it's so additive.
Yeah. I know. Oh, sorry. You go, Alex.
No, go ahead, Bill.
I know we talk about the offense a lot, but just one more point on that with the Mitch lineup.
Yeah.
I actually think you could have incredible spacing. Like, let's say you have Mikhail in the corner, Brunson and Cat on the other side, and then it's a Hart Mitch pick and roll. You have so much room to operate. I don't think they do that a lot. And I'm like a big proponent of Josh Hart just like having the ball more and creating more, which I just don't think will happen. But like 2, 3, 4 possessions a game, running that pick and roll, you have so much space. Like, where are you going to send help from? Are you going to help off Cat? There's no way you're going to help off Brunson. Brunson's going to absolutely destroy you getting a hard closeout. So I think like the lineups on offense with Mitch can actually work. Just pivoting a little bit to like who's running the action, and I think it could look really good.
Well, I think we've kind of gone around talking about kind of tiptoed around not talking about the biggest player on the Knicks so far, which is Jalen Brunson, who's playing some of his best ball of late. So we want to talk about him real quick as well. That's it for today's episode. We got to save a little bit of meat on the bone for tomorrow. So we'll be back tomorrow with Bailey to talk through Jalen Brunson's game, what's been going right for him lately, how important catching and shooting is for him, and finding off-ball opportunities for him, as well as Josh Hart's role in the whole thing. So it's a really nice extra little conversation, but you got to wait till tomorrow. So just stay tuned and we'll have that conversation for you guys tomorrow. But in the meantime, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.